Welcome to the Corval Group Forklift Safety Training Module. The purpose of this training is to increase a worker's ability to identify, avoid, and control hazards associated with operating and working around forklifts. This training module in no way is to be used as a certifier for use of a forklift. Additional training is necessary for the class of forklift that will be used. The objectives of this training module are as follows: terms and definitions relating to forklifts, facts and figures about forklifts, OSHA regulations relating to forklifts, and safe work practices when working around and operating forklifts. Through this training module, the following terms will be used: mast and carriage, nameplate, overhead guard, competent person, forklift types, Class 4, Class 5, Class 7. Forklifts can be very dangerous. In an average year, 100 people die in forklift-related accidents. Tens of thousands of forklift-related injuries occur each year, and about 20,000 of these result in lost workdays. Common forklift-related injuries could result from hitting a pedestrian with a forklift tip-over, improperly positioning loads, falling from the forks or from a platform positioned on the forks, falling from a ladder that is struck by a forklift, and being struck by materials that fall from a forklift. This illustration shows the basic features of a typical forklift. Most forklifts have certain features in common. You need to know what these features are and how to use them properly and safely. Take a moment or two to study this illustration and identify the features of a typical forklift. Note that this illustration represents a typical forklift. However, features may vary depending on the manufacturer and model. OSHA requires all forklifts to have legible nameplates that are specific to the forklift and any attachments it has. You should report any forklift that does not have a nameplate. The nameplate contains information about the weight of the forklift, the proper tire size and pressure, the type of fuel it uses, and any attachments it has. The nameplate lists the capacity and load center of the forklift, which is probably the most important information for an operator to know. The capacity is the maximum weight of a load that can be safely lifted to the forklift's maximum height, assuming the center of gravity of the load is within the rated load center. The load center is the distance between the vertical face of the forks and the center of gravity of the load. The stability triangle is a concept that you should always keep in mind when operating a forklift to avoid actions that could cause the forklift to tip over. A typical forklift has a 3-point suspension with the weight supported by the 2 front tires and the center of the rear axles. This creates a triangle. Its center of gravity is shown by the circle, right in the middle of the triangle, which is also right below where the operator sits. For safe operation, the center of gravity of a forklift that is carrying a load must stay within this stability triangle, or else the forklift will tip over. The center of gravity when the forklift is carrying its maximum rated load is different from when the forklift is empty. The center of gravity with a maximum is shown by the black circle near the front edge of the stability triangle, but still within the triangle. The center of gravity is the balance point of the load. For loads that are composed of consistent material, the balance point will be near the center of the load. If the load is inconsistent, the load center will be on the side with the heaviest material. For example, if a pallet contains bricks on one side and pillows on the other, the center of gravity would be closer to the side with the bricks. If possible, a load should always be picked up on the side that is closest to its center of gravity. This helps keep the weight of the load closer to the forklift and reduces the risk of the load falling off or causing the forklift to tip over. These illustrations show some examples of how a forklift can tip over. In the illustration on the left, the center of gravity is near the front of the stability triangle. This might be caused by the forklift carrying its maximum load, the mast tipping forward, the forklift stopping abruptly, the forklift quickly accelerating in reverse, or the forklift driving up a ramp. In the illustration in the middle, the center of gravity is near the rear. This could be caused by tilting the mast back, stopping abruptly when traveling in reverse, quickly accelerating forward, or driving up a ramp. In the illustration on the right, the center of gravity is on the side of the stability triangle. This might be caused by turning a corner, having an unbalanced load, driving into a pothole, or traveling on a sloping surface. Combinations of actions or circumstances could also cause the center of gravity to shift outside the stability triangle and tip the forklift over. For example, a forklift that turns a corner while driving up a ramp could shift the center of gravity too far backward and to the side, causing a tip over. A forklift moving forward with a capacity load could tip forward if forced to stop abruptly, or a forklift turning a corner with an unbalanced load could tip over if it drove into a pothole. Forklift attachments such as carton clamps, drum clamps, paper roll clamps, rotators, jibs, and push-pull elements can affect the capacity of a forklift in a number of ways, including the ability to change the operating clearances by extending the length and width of the forklift, the ability to change the capacity of the forklift by adding weight. Say the attachment weighs 1,000 pounds. The capacity of the load you can carry is reduced by 1,000 pounds. The ability to change the stability and center of gravity of the forklift. If an attachment moves the load away from the vertical face of the forks, this will reduce the maximum load the forklift can carry. Most accidents with forklifts involve pedestrians. Some common causes of accidents involving pedestrians are as follows. The operator may have an obstructed view because of a load or an obstruction in the path. Turning the forklift toward a pedestrian who is in front of or alongside the forklift. The operator driving too fast to stop before hitting a pedestrian. Pedestrian not noticing the forklift. And carrying passengers on the forklift. No one is permitted to ride a forklift for any reason. Some forklift hazards are caused by the conditions present in the environment where the forklift is operating. Here are some examples. Using combustible fuel-operated forklift in a poorly ventilated area, which could allow the buildup of carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide from the forklift. A work environment with ramps, which can increase the chance of a forklift accident. Crossing railroad tracks, which can unbalance the forklift or the load. Operating and braking on slippery floors. Operating on dirt and gravel, or poor lighting. Some of the hazards present while carrying a load include working around loading docks, carrying loads that restrict vision, and stacking and unstacking on racks. One of the most important steps to take prior to operating a forklift is the inspection. A thorough inspection of the forklift prior to use has the ability to prevent accidents from occurring. The first step toward safe forklift operation is conducting the pre-operational inspection. Conduct the inspection at the start of each work shift to ensure that the forklift will work properly. According to OSHA, 1 in 15 forklift-related accidents are caused by improper maintenance. Completely fill out the pre-operational inspection sheet and note any deficiencies that need attention. If deficiencies are noted, the forklift must be tagged out of service until it is made fully functional. The pre-operational inspection begins with a walk-around. First, be sure that the forklift is properly disengaged with the forks down, the key turned off, and the forklift set in neutral with the parking brake on. Second, walk to either side of the forklift. Check the tires, making sure there are no gouges, tears, or embedded metal, and that there is proper inflation. And check the lug nuts. Make sure the axle is greased. Check the overhead guard, and see that there is no debris lodged behind the mast. Next, check the front of the forklift. The forks and hoses should be in good condition. Fork pins should be in place. The backrest should be solid, and the mast and chains should be greased. Finally, walk to the rear of the forklift. Check that the counterbalance bolt is tight and the radiator is clear of debris and is not leaking. Pictured is the Corval Group Forklift Inspection Form. The form is to be completed at the beginning of each shift, prior to the operation of the forklift. If using a propane-powered forklift, you should inspect the following engine components. Check all oil and fluid levels. Check cables and ensure they are secure and not damaged. Check the fan belt and clear the fan and radiator of debris. And check the propane tank and hose attachments, and make sure they're in good condition and there are no signs of a leak. If using an electric-powered forklift, check the battery to make sure it's in good condition. Prior to operating the forklift, check the following while at the controls: the gauges, lights, horn, backup alarm, warning light, tilt and lift mechanism, and parking brake. Listen for any unusual noises from the tilt and lift mechanism. Inspect the hoses and chains of the lift. Test the parking brake. Test the steering, seatbelt, and brakes. Look on the floor for oil or water leaks. Forklifts are a dangerous piece of equipment, but if operated properly, they can help achieve many tasks. The following are some basic safety rules for forklift operation. Only authorized drivers who have been through an approved training program may operate a forklift. Always report any forklift-related accidents as quickly as possible. Always wear your seatbelt. No one should ever stand under upraised forks. If the hydraulic system fails, anyone standing under forks could be crushed. Operate the controls only when sitting in the driver's seat. And never block exits or access to emergency equipment with a forklift. Forklift operators are required to understand and follow all traffic safety rules and procedures. Among other requirements, forklift operators are required to obey speed limits and maintain a speed that will allow them to stop safely as needed. Operators are also required to drive in the assigned lane or on the right. This way you know where to look for oncoming forklifts. Forklift operators are trained to look in the direction of the travel route and keep it clearly in view at all times. Operators must be aware of pedestrians walking or working in the area. Operators must always be assessing that their route is clear and be concentrating on their driving so that if they need to stop suddenly, they can react quickly and effectively. Operators must yield right-of-way to pedestrians. It is important to remember that operators may not be able to see you, or that they may not be able to stop in time. So it is up to you to decide whether or not to pass in front of or behind a forklift. A good rule of thumb is to wait for the operator to make eye contact with you, and wait for them to give a signal to cross behind or in front of them. Operators must also slow down and sound their horn at intersections or places with poor visibility, like corners. Operators must sound the horn or give another appropriate warning when they believe a worker may not know that a forklift is moving in the worker's direction. Forklift operators are trained to avoid getting too close to pedestrians. Operators should be especially careful of getting too close to a worker standing in front of a storage structure, bench, machine, or other fixed object. Crushed by incidents and struck by incidents are part of OSHA's Big Four, the 4 most common causes for workplace deaths. Driving slowly around turns not only helps prevent tip-over accidents, but it can also help prevent coming around the corner and hitting a pedestrian that may have been in a blind spot. Operators must look behind the forklift prior to moving in reverse. When leaving the forklift for any amount of time, the operator must set the parking brake and remove the keys from the forklift. Operators have a lot of responsibility, but ultimately it is up to the pedestrian to make safe decisions in order to keep themselves safe. This means always keeping alert for forklift activity in your work area. As you work, keep track of where forklifts are and what they are doing. Become familiar with the routes forklifts travel and the tasks they perform. Maintain a safe working distance from forklifts. This distance is dependent upon the type of forklift, the surface it is driving upon, and whether or not the forklift is carrying a load. If you hear horns or backup alarms, take the time to stop and identify where they're coming from, and for what reason. Do not assume an operator can see you. Be proactive and move yourself out of the way of the forklift. Just as when crossing a street, you must look in both directions before crossing a forklift path. Obey all traffic signage, and when available, use walkways and/or stay behind solid barriers to protect yourself from a forklift. Wear high visibility clothing when working around forklifts. Working in a noisy environment can exacerbate the hazards of working around a forklift because the noise may impede your ability to hear a forklift approaching or hear their horns or other warnings. All employees and subcontractors are empowered, authorized, and obligated by the owners, president, and leadership of Corval Group to stop work at any time for any unsafe condition. All employees and subcontractors are expected to stop working until the hazard or risk has been resolved. The stop work authority can be difficult for employees to embrace because of the fear of losing their job. Be assured that no employee will ever be penalized for using stop work authority. The following are some actions to be taken in the case of a forklift tipping over. The seat belt must always be worn by the operator. Hold tightly onto the steering wheel. Plant your feet firmly against the deck. And lean away from the impact point. Above all else, never try and jump from a tipping forklift. Oftentimes, this leads to the operator being crushed by the body of the forklift or the protective cage. Loading and unloading a forklift must always be done safely. The following are some safety tips when loading or unloading a forklift. Never overload the forklift beyond its rated capacity. The capacity of the forklift can be found on the nameplate. Identify the weight and center of gravity of the load. Inspect the load for stability, protrusions, and damage to the pallet prior to lifting the load. If the load is unstable, restack it, and if necessary, secure it with straps or ropes. For a wide load, spread the forks as wide as possible, so that the load will fall inward if it becomes unstable. Be sure forks are completely under the load before attempting to lift. Only use the rear towing pin for towing. Never drill a hole in the forks as a way to tow something or as a place for a chain hook. This ruins the integrity of the forks. Forklifts are equipped with a tow bar in the back for emergency towing. However, not all forklifts are designed to tow all types of loads. Be sure to check the user's manual for specific rules regarding towing. Remember these safety rules when traveling in a forklift. Look in the direction you're traveling. That means looking behind you before and while backing up. Keep your body inside the cage. The cage is there to protect you. Keep the forks low when traveling. Keeping them raised reduces stability and could result in a tip over. Sound the horn at corners, aisles, doorways, and anywhere else that you might not see someone or someone might not see you. Don't speed. A safe speed is one at which you can quickly and easily stop if you need to. Finally, check your clearances. Check overhead before lifting a load and check your turning clearance because the rear end of the forklift will swing wide. When parking a forklift, remember these safety rules. Don't park in a way that blocks an exit or access to emergency equipment. Lower the forks to the ground so that no one can get under the forks and so that no one can trip on them. Set the gear shift to neutral. Always set the parking brake and turn off the key. Rough terrain forklifts are versatile material handlers that are used to handling all kinds of materials in a variety of work situations. They're used in construction, lumber yards, mining operations, landscaping, agriculture, loading and unloading rail cars, and other outdoor work where the forklift has to be able to handle unpaved surfaces, disturbed ground, and other difficult terrain that a regular forklift could not handle safely. Heavy-duty construction and large tires with deep treads make it possible for these trucks to carry thousands of pounds of material over rugged surfaces. Powered by an internal combustion engine that operates on gasoline, diesel, or propane, they have plenty of power and speed. Features such as telescoping booms allow these forklifts to lift large loads high to stack and remove materials, which makes them especially useful for many different work sites. Most rough terrain forklift accidents are the result of operator error. Errors may include visibility issues such as not having a clear line of sight in the direction of travel, inattention while driving, failure to warn other vehicles or pedestrians, overloading the forklift, improper loading or unloading the forklift, misjudging terrain, failure to inspect or maintain the forklift properly, and failure to obey site traffic rules. Stability can be affected by many conditions, such as ground conditions, speed of travel, grade and slope, load, tire inflation, and operator skill, knowledge, and judgment. Before operating a rough terrain forklift, you should always conduct a brief but careful inspection of the equipment. Items to check include operating controls and brakes, lights, horn and backup alarm, gauges and indicators, tire condition and pressure, engine fluids, hoses and belts, safety belts, automatic shutoff, forks, tilt mechanism, master or boom, and hydraulic cables and connections. Do not operate a forklift that is not in safe condition. Report problems to a supervisor immediately, and make sure no one else uses the forklift until it is fixed. This is an example of what the Corval Group Rough Terrain Forklift Inspection Form looks like. This form is to be completed prior to use at the start of each shift. You should also inspect the worksite before you begin operating a rough terrain forklift, and look for possible hazards. Some hazards to look for may include hazardous ground or soil conditions, water hazards, electric power lines and other overhead obstructions, slopes and edges, ground hazards such as culverts, excavations, trenches, holes and dips, line of sight and areas of obstructed visibility, the possibility of hazardous weather, confined areas and maneuverability issues, and speed restrictions. One of the most important contributions you can make to worksite safety and to your own safety is to follow safe operating procedures when driving a rough terrain forklift. For example, only operate a rough terrain forklift if you're trained and authorized. Make sure controls are operating properly. Check backup alarm and horn to be sure they're working properly. Use a signal person at a safe distance on the ground when you can't see clearly while backing or maneuvering. And wear a seatbelt at all times when operating the fork truck. You must also take proper precautions when traveling, with or without a load. Remember these basic rules. Look in the direction of travel and maintain a clear line of sight. Accelerate gradually and back up slowly, especially when carrying a load. Take care when traveling on uneven ground and slopes. Keep the boom and load as low as possible when traveling. Maintain proper clearances from power lines and other overhead obstructions. And be careful when operating in confined areas like narrow aisles, so that you do not hit any structures or people. Here are the key points to remember about this session on forklift safety. Know the main hazards of forklifts, which include pedestrians, environmental conditions in the workplace, and loading and unloading. Position loads as close as possible to the vertical backrest. Remember what you learned about the center of gravity of a load and the stability triangle. Always conduct and document a pre-operational inspection before operating a forklift. Always follow the safe operating rules of the road. And never operate a forklift unless you are trained and authorized to do so. Thank you for participating in this Corval Group Just-in-Time training module. Contact your regional safety manager with questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you for participating in the Corval Group Just-in-Time training module. Contact your regional safety manager with questions, comments, or concerns.